The rain wasn't falling down, it was coming sideways, an atmospheric river they call it in Seattle. I stood outside the iron gate of my family's estate, shivering in a soaked hoodie while my mother and sister drank tea inside where it was warm. My mother had locked me out because my sister claimed I stole $12,000 from her account. I was 15. Hypothermic. Innocent. My phone was at 12% battery. I didn't beg to come in. I called my father instead. And what he found on my sister's iPad destroyed them both. If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button, subscribe, and type "interested" in the comments. And I will give you a heart. My name is Sierra St. James, and I'm 17 now. But this story takes place when I was 15, standing outside my family's estate in the middle of the worst storm Seattle had seen in a decade. The kind of storm where the rain doesn't fall, it attacks. Horizontal sheets of water driven by wind so violent it felt personal, like nature itself had decided I deserved punishment. I was wearing a thin gray hoodie, jeans, and sneakers that were supposed to be waterproof but gave up after the first 30 seconds. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. Not from fear. From cold. The kind of cold that starts on your skin and burrows deep into your bones until you forget what warmth even feels like. 20 minutes earlier, I'd been setting the dinner table. The house had smelled like roasted garlic and rosemary, the kind of smell that's supposed to mean home and safety and family. My mother Patricia was in the kitchen supervising the housekeeper, making sure every detail was perfect because that's what Patricia does. She performs perfection. My sister Tiffany was upstairs in her room, probably taking selfies or texting her friends or doing whatever 17-year-old golden children do when they're not actively destroying their siblings' lives. Then came the scream. A shriek so loud and so perfectly pitched that it could have won awards. Tiffany came running down the stairs, her face a masterpiece of devastated innocence. Tears streaming down her cheeks. Phone clutched in her hand like evidence at a crime scene. She was sobbing so hard she could barely speak, which should have been my first clue something was wrong because Tiffany has never in her life been too upset to perform a monologue. "It's gone," she wailed, throwing herself into my mother's arms. "All of it. $12,500. Someone stole it from my account." My mother's face went from concerned to furious in half a second. "What do you mean stolen? How is that possible?" "I don't know," Tiffany sobbed, holding out her phone with a trembling hand. "I was checking my balance and it's just gone. Transferred out. To some account I don't recognize." She turned to look at me then. Turned slowly, dramatically, like she was in a theater production. Her eyes were red and wet, but there was something else there too, something I'd seen before but never fully understood until that moment. Calculation. Cold, precise calculation. "She must have done it," Tiffany said, pointing at me. "She must have used my Face ID while I was sleeping. She's the only one who comes in my room. She's always jealous of what I have." I didn't even get a chance to speak. Didn't get to say, "That's insane," or check the transaction details, or "Why would I even know your bank password?" My mother looked at me with an expression I'd seen countless times before but never quite this intense. Disgust. Pure, absolute, bone-deep disgust. Like I was something foul she'd discovered growing in her refrigerator. "Patricia, I started, but I didn't get to finish." She crossed the room in 2 strides and slapped me. Hard. The sound echoed through the house louder than Tiffany's fake sobs. It wasn't a disciplinary slap. It wasn't a "you're in trouble young lady" slap. It was a slap of hatred. A slap that said I've been waiting for an excuse to do this. My cheek burned. My eyes watered. But I didn't cry. I'd learned years ago that crying in front of Patricia only made things worse. She grabbed my arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my skin hard enough to leave marks, and she dragged me toward the front door. "Out," she hissed. "Get out of my house. You're not staying here another second. Not after what you've done." "Mom, please, I didn't take anything, just look at I said out. She threw the door open and physically shoved me onto the front porch. I stumbled, barely catching myself on the railing. The rain hit me immediately, cold and shocking. Before I could turn around, before I could try to reason with her one more time, she slammed the door. I heard the deadbolt slide into place. Then I heard the electronic gate lock engage with a mechanical click that sounded like a prison cell closing. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds, my brain trying to catch up with what had just happened, trying to process that my mother had just thrown me out of the house in the middle of a storm. In November. In Seattle. Where hypothermia is a real and documented threat. I walked down the driveway to the gate, my shoes squelching with every step, and I looked through the iron bars at the house. Through the warm, glowing windows, I could see them. My mother was back in the living room, pouring tea from the good china pot, the one she only used for special occasions. Tiffany was curled up on the sofa under a cashmere blanket, still crying, still performing her grief for an audience of one. They looked comfortable. They looked safe. They looked like they'd just successfully taken out the trash. Any normal teenager in this situation would be banging on that gate, screaming, pressing the intercom button over and over, begging to be let back in, apologizing for things they didn't do just to escape the cold. But I didn't do any of that. I stood there in the freezing rain, water running down my face and into my eyes, and I realized something that changed everything. This wasn't a punishment. This wasn't my mother trying to teach me a lesson about theft or responsibility or consequences. This was entertainment for her. She was watching me from behind those curtains. I couldn't see her, but I could feel her gaze. She was waiting for me to break. Waiting for me to fall to my knees and beg for mercy so she could feel magnanimous when she finally, graciously, decided to let the pathetic wet dog back inside. This was a power play. A demonstration. A reminder that in this family, Patricia controlled everything. Who was loved. Who was believed. Who got to stay warm and who got thrown into the storm. And I realized something else. Something that made my hands stop shaking from fear and start shaking from something colder and harder. She'd been doing this my entire life. Not the literal throwing me out in storms part, but the emotional version. Making me the villain so Tiffany could shine. Blaming me for things I didn't do so my sister could be the perfect victim. Gaslighting me into thinking I was the problem. I was the one who needed to try harder, be better, earn the love that came automatically and unconditionally to Tiffany. Psychologists call it scapegoating. One child designated to carry all the family's dysfunction so the other can be golden. I was 15 years old and I'd been playing that role since I was old enough to understand that something in our family wasn't quite right. But standing there at that locked gate, freezing and abandoned, I made a decision. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to give Patricia the satisfaction of seeing me broken. I wasn't going to validate her sick little power fantasy by playing the role of the desperate child pleading for scraps of affection. Instead, I pulled out my phone. Battery at 12% and dropping. I ignored the text from Tiffany that had just come in. Probably some gloating message about how I was getting what I deserved. I ignored my survival instinct screaming at me to call an Uber, get to somewhere warm, deal with the consequences later. I called my father, Robert St. James. He traveled for work constantly, gone more often than he was home, always chasing the next big deal. He'd left that morning for what was supposed to be a 3-day business trip to Portland. He was 2 hours away, probably in a meeting, probably with his phone on silent. I called anyway. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I was preparing to leave a voicemail, trying to figure out how to explain this situation in 30 seconds, when he answered, "Sierra." His voice was concerned immediately. He could hear the rain, the wind, the sound of my teeth chattering. "What's wrong? Where are you?" "Outside," I managed. My jaw was shaking so hard it was difficult to form words. "Outside the gate. Mom locked me out. She thinks I stole money from Tiffany. I didn't. Dad, I swear I didn't, but she won't listen and she threw me out and I'm freezing and..." "I'm coming," he said, cutting through my rambling explanation. "Right now. I'm leaving. Stay on the phone with me. Don't hang up." I heard him moving, Heard him making excuses to whoever he was with. Heard a car door slam and an engine start. "I'm 20 minutes away," he said. "Maybe 15 if I speed. Talk to me. Stay conscious. Tell me what happened." So I told him. Standing there in the rain with my phone pressed to my ear and my free hand tucked under my armpit trying to preserve any remaining body heat, I explained the whole thing. Tiffany's accusation. The missing money. The Face ID theory. Patricia's immediate belief without asking a single question or looking at a single piece of evidence. My father didn't interrupt. Didn't ask clarifying questions. He just listened while I talked and he drove, breaking probably every speed limit between Portland and Seattle. "She didn't even check the transaction," I said, my voice cracking not from tears but from the cold. "She didn't ask to see the bank statement. She didn't ask me for my side. She just believed Tiffany instantly and threw me out. In a storm. I could die out here, Dad. I could actually die and she's inside drinking tea." "You're not going to die," my father said, and his voice had gone very quiet, very calm. The kind of calm that's actually more terrifying than yelling. "I'm 8 minutes away. I can see the exit. Hold on." I held on. Counted seconds. Watched the road for headlights. And I thought about my sister, warm and dry inside, probably texting her friends about how she'd finally gotten rid of me, how she'd won. I thought about my mother, who'd chosen so long ago which daughter mattered and which one was disposable. I thought about the $12,500 that had supposedly been stolen, money from our grandmother's inheritance that Tiffany was meant to use for a summer program in Europe. And I thought about the lie that had been so easy for both of them to believe because it fit the narrative they'd already written. Sierra is the problem, Tiffany is the victim, and Patricia is the noble mother protecting her good child from her bad one. Then I saw headlights. 2 bright beams cutting through the rain like salvation. My father's black SUV came around the corner going way too fast. Tires hydroplaning slightly as he hit the puddles. He should have slowed down. Should have stopped at the gate and used the code to open it properly. He didn't. He saw me standing there, soaked and shivering, locked out of my own home. He saw the iron bars between us. And he made a choice. He swerved hard to the right. The engine roared. He jumped the curb and drove straight through my mother's prize-winning hydrangea bushes, the ones she'd spent thousands of dollars having professionally landscaped. There was a sickening, satisfying crunch as 2 tons of metal and fury flattened ornamental shrubs and tore through the perfectly manicured lawn. He didn't stop until his front bumper was inches from the porch steps. He was out of the car before the engine stopped running. He didn't run to me. He stalked. Pulled off his heavy wool coat and wrapped it around my shoulders in one smooth motion. The warmth was shocking, almost painful against my frozen skin. But the expression on his face was colder than the storm. He looked at the locked door, then down at me. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. "Stay behind me," he said. His voice was low, deadly calm. The kind of calm that meant someone was about to learn exactly what happened when you hurt his daughter. He walked up the porch steps and didn't bother with his key. He didn't knock politely. He drew his leg back and kicked the door right below the lock with all the force of a man who'd just driven 90 miles an hour through a storm to rescue his child. The mahogany door, solid and expensive and supposed to be virtually indestructible, splintered like kindling. And that's when my mother learned that there are some things more expensive than hydrangeas. The door bounced off the interior wall with a crack that shook the chandelier. The transition from outside to inside was so abrupt it felt like crossing dimensions. 1 second I was in chaos, wind and rain and cold so intense it felt like being stabbed with thousands of tiny ice needles. The next second I was standing in a warm, perfectly decorated foyer that smelled like lavender candles and Earl Grey tea, and the kind of money that's supposed to protect you from consequences. The contrast made my head spin. Made me wonder if the last 20 minutes had even been real. But the water dripping from my clothes onto the cream-colored Persian rug told me it was very, very real. Patricia was standing in the middle of the living room, frozen with a porcelain teacup halfway to her lips. She looked like a photograph, perfectly styled even at home in silk loungewear that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her hair was blown out. Her makeup was flawless. She looked like she was ready for a magazine photo shoot about elegant mothers living their best lives. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look horrified that her husband had just driven across the lawn and kicked in the front door. She looked annoyed, inconvenienced, like a hostess whose dinner party had been interrupted by someone showing up in the wrong attire. "Have you lost your mind, Robert?" she snapped, setting the cup down with a sharp clink against its saucer. "You destroyed the hydrangeas. You ruined the lawn. Do you have any idea how much that landscaping cost? I told you I was handling Sierra's discipline. This is completely inappropriate." She stole from her sister. She needs to learn that actions have consequences. My father didn't even look at her. That was the thing that made my mother's face flicker for just a second with something that might have been fear or might have been rage. He completely ignored her. Walked right past her like she was a piece of furniture, his wet boots leaving dark muddy tracks across her pristine floor. He walked directly to the sofa where Tiffany was curled up under a cashmere blanket, looking small and fragile and innocent. She had her iPad clutched to her chest like a security blanket. Her eyes were wide and still red from crying, though I noticed the tears had stopped the moment Dad kicked in the door. Interesting timing. "Robert, don't you dare ignore me." Patricia's voice went up an octave, taking on that shrill quality that usually made everyone in the house scramble to appease her. "Your daughter is a thief. She stole $12,500 from her sister. From Tiffany's inheritance. She violated trust. My father stopped in front of Tiffany. He was dripping water onto the expensive upholstery, and he didn't care even a little bit. He towered over my sister, and for the first time in my life, I saw Tiffany look actually afraid. Not performing fear. Not fake tears. Real fear. She tried to shrink back into the cushions. Tried to make herself smaller. Tried to summon those crocodile tears that had worked on everyone for 17 years. "Daddy, I don't know what she told you, but give it to me," my father said. His voice was quiet. Calm. Absolutely terrifying. "What?" Tiffany's voice came out small, uncertain. "Give me the iPad. It's private. My stuff. You can't just give it to me." He didn't wait for her to comply. He reached down and pulled the iPad from her hands. Not violently. Not aggressively. But with the kind of authority that made it clear this wasn't a negotiation. "That's my property." Tiffany shrieked, and the fear was gone now, replaced by entitled outrage. She lunged for the device, her perfectly manicured nails clawing at Dad's arm. But he held it up out of her reach like he was keeping a dangerous toy away from a toddler throwing a tantrum. "Give it back to her, Robert," Patricia demanded, stepping between them, trying to physically block my father. "You are violating her privacy. You have no right to go through your daughter's personal property. You have no right to treat her like a criminal in her own home." "I pay the bill," my father said, his voice cutting through their protests like a knife through paper. "I own the family plan. I pay for the device. I pay for the data. Legally, I have every right." He didn't waste time trying to guess Tiffany's passcode. Didn't argue about ethics or rights or privacy. He walked over to the 80-inch OLED television mounted above the fireplace, the one Patricia usually kept on a loop of serene landscape paintings to impress guests, and he used AirPlay to mirror the iPad screen. The peaceful mountain meadow on the TV flickered and disappeared. In its place, Tiffany's home screen appeared, magnified to a terrifying 4 feet wide. Every app, every notification, every little secret suddenly visible to everyone in the room. "Robert, stop this immediately," Patricia said, her voice taking on a desperate edge now. She moved to stand in front of the television like her body could block what was about to be revealed. "This is humiliating. You're humiliating your own daughter. Whatever Sierra told you, she's lying. She's always been a liar. She's manipulative. Move," my father said. Not shouted. Just said. But there was something in his voice that made Patricia step aside. Something that made it clear he was done listening to her. He opened the Venmo app. There was no hacking required. No forensic investigation. It was right there at the top of the transaction history, timestamped from 3 hours ago. Sent to Lux Life resale amount, $12,500 memo. Investment piece. The silence that fell over the room was thick enough to suffocate in. Patricia stared at the giant screen, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to form words, but her brain couldn't quite figure out which ones. That doesn't prove anything, she said finally, desperately. Her voice had lost its sharp edge, turned uncertain. Sierra could have done that. She could have stolen the iPad while Tiffany was sleeping. She could have made the transfer and then put it back. She's clever enough to. Is that right? My father asked. His voice was so calm it was unnerving. He swiped up on the iPad. Opened the email app. The most recent email was timestamped 2.5 hours ago. Subject: Your order has shipped. Tracking number included. Sender: Chanel official. The body of the email contained shipping details, order confirmation, and a delivery address. Not my address. Not some random locker or drop point where I could have tried to intercept a package. It was addressed to Tiffany St. James, care of Madison Porter, 847, Lakewood Avenue, 2 streets over. Madison Porter. Tiffany's best friend since middle school. Did Sierra order a $5,000 Chanel handbag to your best friend's house? My father asked, turning to look at Tiffany. His voice was still quiet, still calm. Did she somehow forge the Chanel confirmation email too? Did she hack into the company's system and arrange shipping to Madison's address? Tiffany was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. But these weren't the pretty, delicate tears she'd been crying earlier. These were ugly, splotchy, mascara-running tears. The kind of tears that come when you're cornered and you know there's no way out. I needed it, she sobbed, her voice breaking into a whine. Everyone at school has one. Do you know what it's like being the only one without the right bag? The pressure, the expectations. You don't understand what it's like being me. Having to maintain appearances. I needed it. You needed it, my father repeated flatly. He looked at the screen again, at the confirmation email, at the tracking number that proved beyond any doubt where the stolen money had gone. But that's not even the worst part, he said. He wasn't done. He swiped again. Opened Tiffany's messages app. He didn't have to scroll far. The group chat pinned at the top was still active. The most recent message had been sent 7 minutes ago. Right while I was freezing at the gate. Right while Patricia was pouring tea and performing her role as the protective mother. Right while I was standing in hypothermic conditions, wondering if my own family was going to let me die. Everyone in the room read Tiffany's words, magnified on the giant screen in high definition. OMG, you guys, it actually worked. The loser is literally freezing outside the gate right now. Mom is totally buying it. She's pouring me tea like I'm the victim. I'm a genius. Bye bye, Sierra. Attached to the message was a photo. A blurry, zoomed-in picture taken from the living room window. A picture of me. Standing in the rain. Shaking. Alone. The golden child narrative didn't just crack in that moment. It shattered into a million irreparable pieces. My father stared at that message. Read it once. Twice. 3 times. I watched his face change. Watched something die behind his eyes. The image of his perfect family. The belief that his wife loved both their daughters equally. The hope that Tiffany was just spoiled but not actually cruel. All of it died right there in front of the fireplace. He turned slowly to look at Patricia. You said you were protecting the family, he whispered. You said Sierra was out of control. You said she needed to learn a lesson. Look at that screen, Patricia. Look at what you were protecting. She's 16, Robert, Patricia said, her voice going shrill and desperate. She stepped between him and the TV again, like she could physically block the evidence of what she'd done. She's just a child. She's acting out. She made a mistake. Girls her age do stupid things when they feel insecure. We can return the bag. We can get the money back. We can fix this. It's just money. It's just money, my father said. His voice was dead. Empty. He wasn't looking at Patricia anymore. He was looking at the iPad in his hands, at something else he'd noticed in the email app. Something that had caught his attention before he'd opened the messages. Something that made his jaw clench and his hands start shaking. Move, Patricia, he said. No. Robert, you've made your point. You've humiliated her enough. This is cruel. You're being cruel to your own daughter. He didn't argue with her. Didn't push her aside. Just stepped around her and tapped the screen again. The TV display changed. He wasn't looking at the inbox anymore. He'd opened the trash folder. The deleted emails folder that most people forget even exists. What are you doing? Patricia demanded, grabbing at his arm. Stop. Stop digging through her private things. You're just looking for reasons to hate her. You're trying to turn this into something it's not. She made one mistake. She's sorry. I'm looking for the truth, my father said, shaking off her grip. He opened a deleted email. It was dated 2 days ago. The screen showed an acceptance letter. Congratulations, Sierra. We are thrilled to inform you that you have been accepted to the Pacific Northwest Summer STEM Initiative with a full scholarship covering tuition, room, board, and materials. This is a highly competitive program with only 25 spots available nationally, and your application stood out among hundreds of qualified candidates. Please confirm your acceptance by clicking the link below. We look forward to welcoming you this summer. I stared at that email. I had been waiting for weeks to hear back from that program, had checked my email obsessively every day, had finally convinced myself I hadn't gotten in. But I had. I'd gotten in. With a full scholarship. And I'd never seen this email. Below the acceptance letter was a reply, sent 23 hours ago from my email account. Thank you for the opportunity, but I need to decline this acceptance. I have decided to pursue other options. Please give my spot to another student. Regards, Sierra St. James. The email had been sent at 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday. I checked the timestamp against my memory. Thursday at 3:47 p.m. I was at volleyball practice. I was on the court. I didn't have my phone. I couldn't have sent that email. But someone with access to my email account could have. Someone who knew my password because I'd stupidly used the same password for everything. Someone who would benefit from me not going away to a competitive summer program. Someone who wanted to make sure I stayed right where I was, under her shadow, never getting ahead. She got the scholarship, my father said, his voice barely above a whisper. He looked at Tiffany, and I'd never seen that expression on his face before. Betrayal. Deep, fundamental betrayal. You found her acceptance letter. You declined it from her account. And then you deleted everything so she'd never know. The silence was absolute. Patricia had no defense this time. No excuse. No spin. Tiffany sat frozen on the sofa, her face the color of old milk. You didn't just steal money from her, I said, and my voice surprised me because it didn't shake, didn't crack, came out cold and clear and certain. You stole my future. You found my way out and you destroyed it. Not because you needed the money. You destroyed my opportunity because you couldn't stand the thought of me being better than you at something. Tiffany's face changed then. The fear melted away. What replaced it was something uglier. Something honest for the first time in years. She smiled. A thin, mean smile that told me everything I needed to know. She'd known exactly what she was doing. And she'd do it again if she got the chance. That smile. That thin, vicious smile on Tiffany's face told me more than any confession ever could. It wasn't the smile of someone who'd made a mistake. It wasn't guilt or shame or remorse. It was the smile of someone who'd been caught but didn't actually regret what they'd done. It was the smile of someone who'd enjoyed every second of watching me suffer and was only sorry the game was over. My father saw it too. I watched his expression change from shock to something harder, something final. You're not even sorry, he said. Not a question. A statement. Tiffany's smile flickered but didn't disappear completely. She shrugged, a small gesture that was somehow more cruel than anything she'd said. She was always going to leave anyway, Tiffany said, her voice taking on a defensive whine. She was always talking about that stupid program. About how she was going to spend the summer doing science experiments and networking with professors. She was going to come back all superior and accomplished, and everyone would think she was so special. I just leveled the playing field. I just made things fair. Fair, my father repeated. The word came out like he was tasting something rotten. You stole $12,000 to buy luxury handbags. You declined your sister's scholarship to a program she earned on merit. You sent her acceptance to the trash so she'd never know she'd been chosen. You framed her for your own theft and convinced your mother to throw her out in a storm where she could have died from exposure. And you think that's fair? She always gets attention for being smart, Tiffany shot back, and now the mask was fully off. The pretty, delicate victim was gone. What remained was entitled rage. Teachers love her. Counselors write her recommendation letters. Everyone acts like she's so impressive because she gets good grades and does science projects. But nobody cares that I have to work twice as hard just to maintain my social position. Nobody understands the pressure of being popular, of having to look perfect and act perfect and have the right things or you become nobody. She doesn't have to worry about any of that. She just gets to be the smart one and everyone applauds. I stared at my sister. Really looked at her for maybe the first time in years. And I realized she actually believed what she was saying. She genuinely thought that her social anxiety about having the right handbag was equivalent to my academic achievements. She thought that her struggle to maintain popularity was the same as my work ethic. She saw us as competitors in some game where we'd been given unequal advantages, never understanding that she'd been given every advantage that actually mattered. Love. Support. Belief. Protection. You had everything, I said quietly. Mom believed every word you said. Dad gave you everything you asked for. You never had to prove yourself. You never had to earn anything. You just had to exist and everyone bent over backward to make you happy. And it still wasn't enough for you. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I interrupted. You weren't afraid I'd be better than you. You were afraid that if I succeeded, people might notice you never actually accomplished anything. Tiffany's face flushed red. She opened her mouth to respond, but my father spoke first. Pack a bag, he said. His voice was flat, emotionless. What? Tiffany blinked, confused. Pack a bag. You have 10 minutes. Take what you can carry. Robert, you can't be serious, Patricia said, finding her voice finally. She moved toward him, reaching for his arm. She made a mistake. Yes, it was serious. Yes, she went too far. But she's your daughter. You can't just throw her out. She's 16 years old. I'm not throwing her out, my father said. He still wouldn't look at Patricia. I'm taking her to her grandmother's house in Spokane. She can spend some time learning what it's like to live without luxury handbags and unlimited credit cards. Maybe she'll develop some perspective. You're overreacting, Patricia insisted. This is cruel. This is vindictive. You're punishing her because you're angry, but this isn't rational. She's just a child who made a bad choice. We can handle this as a family. We can go to therapy. We. My father finally looked at her. Really looked at her. You threw Sierra out in a storm. You didn't ask questions. You didn't check evidence. You didn't even consider that your daughter might be lying. You chose to believe the worst about Sierra because it was easier than admitting Tiffany isn't perfect. I was protecting. You were protecting your fantasy, my father said. Your perfect golden daughter who can do no wrong. You've spent 16 years turning Sierra into a scapegoat so Tiffany never has to face consequences. And tonight you were willing to let Sierra freeze to death, rather than question your favorite child. That's not protection, Patricia. That's abuse. The word hung in the air like a bomb that had just detonated. Abuse. Patricia's face went white. How dare you? I have sacrificed everything for these girls. I have given them everything. I have been a good mother. You've been a good mother to one daughter, my father said. To the other one, you've been a warden, a judge, a punisher for crimes she didn't commit. And I've enabled it by being gone so much. By trusting you to be fair. By assuming that because you were their mother, you loved them equally. I was wrong. He pulled out his phone. Started typing. I'm calling my lawyer. I'm filing for divorce. I'm filing for full custody of Sierra. And I'm starting an investigation into the house. Patricia laughed. Actually laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound. You're filing for divorce? Good luck with that, Robert. This is my house. My family's estate. You have no claim to it. You can leave if you want, but you're leaving alone or with your precious Sierra if you're so concerned about her. But this house is mine. The money is mine. You'll get nothing in the divorce and you know it. My father smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. Actually, Patricia, this house isn't yours. It's held in a trust. A trust that I control, Patricia shot back. A trust established by my grandmother for her descendants. A trust established by Eleanor Martin for the benefit and protection of her descendants, my father interrupted. He was still typing on his phone, pulling up documents. I'm looking at the trust documents right now. The ones I had my lawyer review when we got married. The ones that specify very clearly that you have the right to live in this house as long as you provide a safe and appropriate home for any minor children in your care. He looked up from his phone. Looked directly at Patricia. You locked a 15-year-old out in a storm. In November. In Seattle. Where the temperature was 38 degrees and the wind chill made it feel like 25. You left her there for 23 minutes. Long enough for early-stage hypothermia to set in. Long enough that she could have died. She was perfectly fine, Patricia said, but her voice had lost its confidence. She's standing right there. She's fine. You're being dramatic. I have it on video, my father said. He held up his phone. The doorbell camera. The one you insisted we install for security. It recorded everything. Sierra standing at the gate. Shivering. Trying to call for help. And it recorded you and Tiffany inside, drinking tea, laughing, taking pictures of her suffering. Patricia's face changed. The color drained away completely. You locked your minor child out of the house in dangerous weather conditions, my father continued. That's child endangerment. That's a violation of the trust terms. That's grounds for the trustee to revoke your residency rights immediately. The trustee, Patricia said slowly. Her voice was shaking now. Who is the trustee, Robert? I am, my father said. I've been the trustee since Eleanor died. You never read the paperwork when we got married. You just assumed the house was automatically yours. But it's not. It's held in trust for Eleanor's descendants. For our daughters. And my job as trustee is to ensure that the property is used to protect them, not endanger them. He pulled up another document on his phone. Showed it to Patricia. This is the trust violation notice I'm filing right now. As of this moment, you are in breach of the trust terms. Your right to reside in this property is revoked. You have 10 days to vacate. Patricia stared at the phone. At the legal document. At the words that were dismantling her entire world. You can't do this, she whispered. This is my home. My family's estate. You can't just take it away. I'm not taking it away, my father said. I'm protecting it for its rightful beneficiaries. For Sierra and Tiffany. They will inherit this property when they turn 25. Until then, I'm ensuring it's used appropriately. And that means you no longer have access. Robert, please, Patricia said, and for the first time I'd ever heard, There was genuine fear in her voice. "Don't do this. We can fix this. I'll apologize to Sierra. I'll make it right. I'll be better. Just don't take the house. This is all I have. My entire identity is tied to this place. Without it, I'm nothing." "Then maybe," my father said quietly, "you should have thought about that before you threw your daughter into a storm to protect your fantasy." He looked at me. His eyes were red but dry. "Sierra, go pack a bag. We're leaving. You're coming with me to the hotel tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out next steps. You're going to call that STEM program and explain what happened. We'll see if they'll reinstate your acceptance. And if they won't, we'll find another program. A better program. Because you earned that scholarship and you're not losing opportunities because of her." He gestured at Tiffany without looking at her. I wanted to say something profound. Something that would make them understand the damage they'd caused. But my brain couldn't quite form the words. So I just nodded and walked upstairs to my room. Behind me, I heard Patricia start to cry. Real tears this time, not the performative kind. The tears of someone who just realized she'd gambled everything on the wrong daughter and lost. I packed quickly. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, the few things that actually mattered to me. The room I was leaving had never really felt like mine anyway. It was decorated in colors Patricia had chosen, with furniture she'd picked out, arranged the way she wanted it. I'd always been a guest in this house. A temporary resident who could be evicted at any moment if I stepped out of line. As I zipped up my bag, I heard voices downstairs. My father's, calm and firm. Patricia's, rising in pitch, becoming more desperate. Tiffany's, crying now, real tears finally, understanding that there would actually be consequences this time. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired. And cold. Even inside, even with my father's coat around my shoulders, I still felt cold. When I came back downstairs, my father was standing by the broken front door. He'd called someone, I didn't know who, and they were talking about the trust violation and legal procedures and custody arrangements. Patricia was sitting on the sofa where Tiffany had been earlier, her face in her hands. Tiffany was nowhere to be seen, probably upstairs packing for Spokane. "Ready?" my father asked me. I nodded. We walked out together, leaving the front door broken and swinging slightly in the wind that was still blowing in from the storm. The rain had lightened to a drizzle. The atmospheric river was moving on, having done its damage. My father's SUV was still parked at an angle on the lawn, tire tracks cutting through the mud where the hydrangeas used to be. We got in. He started the engine, turned on the heat, put on my seatbelt for me because my hands were still shaking. We sat there for a moment, the house glowing behind us, warm and beautiful and full of people who tried to destroy me. "I'm sorry," my father said quietly. "I'm sorry I wasn't here. I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening. I'm sorry I let it get this far. You came when I called," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Steady. Calm. Like I'd aged 10 years in one night. That's what matters. He drove us away from the estate. Away from Patricia's tears and Tiffany's entitlement and the broken door and the ruined garden. Away from 15 years of being the scapegoat, the problem, the daughter who didn't quite fit. As we pulled onto the main road, I looked back one last time. Through the lit windows, I could see Patricia still sitting on the sofa, probably planning her next move, figuring out how to spin this, how to make herself the victim. But she'd forgotten something important. Victims don't throw their children into storms. And the trust agreement she'd never bothered to read was about to teach her a lesson about the difference between ownership and entitlement. We stayed at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel that night. My father booked a 2-bedroom suite on the 8th floor with a view of the city lights reflecting off Elliott Bay. The room was warm, almost too warm after hours of freezing, and it smelled like expensive carpet cleaner and the kind of luxury that comes with a $500 nightly rate. I stood in the bathroom for 20 minutes underwater so hot it turned my skin red, trying to thaw the cold that had settled not just in my body but somewhere deeper, somewhere that heat couldn't quite reach. When I finally came out, wearing the hotel bathrobe that was softer than anything I owned, my father had ordered room service. Hot soup, grilled cheese sandwiches, hot chocolate with real whipped cream. Comfort food. The kind of meal you make for someone who's had the worst day of their life. We ate in silence for a while. I was hungrier than I'd realized. The soup was some kind of fancy tomato bisque with herbs I couldn't identify, nothing like the canned stuff, but it tasted like safety. Like someone cared whether I ate or not. I called the STEM program director, my father said finally, setting down his spoon. Explained what happened. Sent her screenshots of the deleted emails, the evidence from Tiffany's iPad, everything. She was horrified. Said this kind of sabotage is taken extremely seriously in academic settings. I looked up from my soup. And your acceptance is reinstated. Full scholarship still stands. She said they're adding a note to your file about the circumstances and offering additional support resources when you arrive. She also said that what Tiffany did constitutes fraud and could be reported to other institutions if she ever tries to apply to competitive programs. Something tight in my chest loosened just slightly. The opportunity wasn't gone. The future I'd worked for hadn't been completely destroyed. The program starts in June, I said. That's 7 months away. 7 months for you to heal, my father said. 7 months to finish the school year strong. 7 months to be a kid without someone sabotaging you at every turn. He paused. I also called a family lawyer. Filed emergency custody papers. Given what happened tonight, the evidence of endangerment, the trust violation, I'm confident the court will grant me full custody within 2 weeks. You'll live with me. We'll figure out the logistics. Maybe get a place closer to your school so you don't have to change districts. Patricia can have supervised visitation if she completes a parenting course and anger management. Tiffany can visit if she agrees to family therapy. She won't agree, I said quietly. Tiffany doesn't think she did anything wrong. Then she won't visit, my father said simply. That's her choice to make. But she's not going to have access to you unless she takes responsibility. I'm done enabling the dynamic that your mother created. I set down my spoon. Why didn't you see it before? All these years. Why did it take me almost dying in a storm for you to notice? My father was quiet for a long moment. He looked older suddenly, tired in a way that had nothing to do with the late hour. I saw pieces of it, he said finally. I saw that Patricia favored Tiffany. I saw that you were always the one getting blamed for things. But I told myself it was normal sibling dynamics. That mothers sometimes connect more with one child. That you were strong enough to handle it. I was traveling so much for work, and when I was home, I was tired. It was easier to believe Patricia when she said you were difficult. When she said you were the problem. He looked at me. I was a coward. I chose to believe a comfortable lie rather than confront an uncomfortable truth. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Sierra. You deserved a father who paid attention. Who questioned the narrative. Who protected you instead of just paying the bills and assuming everything was fine. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to tell him it was okay, to make him feel better. To fall back into the old pattern of being the easy child who didn't make demands. But I was done with that pattern. It wasn't fine, I said. It hasn't been fine for a long time. And I needed you to notice that without me almost dying first. You're right, he said. And I'm going to do better. Starting now. Starting with making sure you never have to go back to that house unless you choose to. 2 days later, Sheriff Miller arrived at the estate with the eviction notice. My father had offered to let me stay at the hotel, to shield me from the confrontation, but I wanted to be there. Needed to see it happen. We pulled up to find Patricia standing on the front porch in full makeup and a designer outfit, like she was prepared to argue her case to whoever would listen. Behind her, through the broken door that hadn't been repaired yet, I could see moving boxes stacked in the foyer. She'd been packing. "Robert, please," Patricia said as we approached. Her voice had that practiced tremor that usually worked on people, the sound of a woman barely holding herself together. "Don't do this. Let me keep the house. I'll do whatever you want. I'll apologize. I'll go to therapy. I'll admit I made mistakes. Just don't take my home." Sheriff Miller stepped forward with the paperwork. "Ma'am, I need you to sign this acknowledging receipt of the eviction notice. You have 10 days to vacate the premises as stipulated in the trust agreement violation clause." Patricia didn't take the papers. She looked at me instead. "Sierra, please. Tell your father this is too much. Tell him I was just trying to protect Tiffany. Tell him I didn't mean for things to go this far. You know I love you. You're my daughter. I was just confused. I was just trying to do what I thought was right." I looked at my mother. At her perfect hair and her perfect makeup and her perfectly practiced expression of maternal concern. And I remembered standing in the freezing rain, watching her pour tea through the window, watching her laugh with Tiffany, watching her take a photograph of my suffering. "You locked me outside in a storm," I said. My voice was steady, clear. "You threw me out of the house because you believed I was a thief without asking a single question. You chose to believe the worst about me because it was easier than admitting your golden child is cruel. And when I was out there freezing, possibly dying, you were drinking tea and taking pictures. You weren't confused. You were enjoying it." Patricia's mask cracked. Just for a second. I saw anger flash across her face, pure and undisguised. Then she caught herself, tried to smooth it back into maternal concern, but it was too late. I'd seen it. "You can't possibly blame me for—" "I can," I interrupted. "And I do. You spent 15 years teaching me that I didn't matter. That Tiffany's feelings were more important than my safety. That my achievements threatened your perfect family narrative. You created a scapegoat so your favorite child never had to face consequences. And when I finally had proof of what she was, when the truth was right in front of you, you still chose her. Even after seeing the messages. Even after knowing she'd sabotaged my scholarship. You were ready to forgive all of it because admitting you were wrong would mean admitting you've been abusing me my entire life." "Abuse?" Patricia's voice went shrill. "I never abused you. I gave you everything. A beautiful home. Private school. Opportunities. How dare you accuse me of—" "You gave me material things," I said. "You never gave me belief. You never gave me the benefit of the doubt. You never gave me the same love you gave Tiffany. And when she committed actual crimes against me, you threw me into a storm to protect her. That's not love. That's not even basic human decency. That's abuse. And I'm done pretending it's anything else." Sheriff Miller cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I need you to sign these papers." Patricia snatched them from his hand, her movements sharp and angry. She signed without reading, her signature a harsh slash across the page. "This isn't over," she said, looking at my father. "I'll fight this. I'll fight the custody. I'll fight the eviction. I'll take you to court and I'll win because I'm her mother and courts favor mothers." "Courts favor the parent who didn't endanger their child," my father said. "And we have video evidence, medical records from Sierra's hypothermia treatment, and her iPad messages proving premeditation and cruelty. You can fight if you want. You'll lose. And you'll lose publicly." Patricia's face went white. "You wouldn't. You wouldn't humiliate me like that in court." "You humiliated yourself," my father said. "I'm just making sure there are consequences." We left her standing on the porch, eviction notice crumpled in her hand, her perfect facade finally cracking into something real and ugly. 5 months later, I was sitting in a different living room. A 2-bedroom apartment in Fremont that my father had rented while we looked for something permanent. It wasn't as big as the estate. Wasn't as fancy. But it was warm and it was mine, and nobody was going to throw me out of it for crimes I didn't commit. The custody hearing had taken 3 weeks. Patricia's lawyer had tried to paint my father as vindictive, tried to claim I'd exaggerated the events of that night. But the doorbell camera footage didn't lie. The medical records of early-stage hypothermia didn't lie. Tiffany's iPad messages didn't lie. The judge had awarded my father full legal and physical custody. Patricia got supervised visitation twice a month if she completed parenting classes and individual therapy. She'd attended 2 sessions before quitting, claiming the therapist was biased against her. Tiffany was still at our grandmother's house in Spokane. She'd started public school there, lost access to her credit cards, was working a part-time job at a coffee shop to earn spending money. My grandmother, my father's mother, was not sympathetic to Tiffany's complaints about how unfair her life had become. According to Dad, Grandma's exact words had been, "If you can steal $12,000 for a purse, you can work minimum wage to earn your gas money." I'd received a letter from Tiffany 2 weeks ago. A long, rambling thing that started with, "I'm sorry you felt hurt," and ended with, "When are you going to forgive me so things can go back to normal?" I'd read it once and then filed it in my desk drawer under maybe never. Patricia had tried calling twice. Both times to ask if I'd be willing to sign a statement saying she wasn't a bad mother, something she could use in her appeal of the trust violation. Both times I'd declined. Both times she'd hung up without saying goodbye. I didn't miss them. That was the thing that surprised me most. I didn't miss my mother's perfect dinner parties or Tiffany's presents or the big house or any of it. What I'd been missing all those years wasn't in that house. It was sitting across from me now, my father helping me fill out the final paperwork for the STEM program, making terrible jokes about Bunsen burners, being present in a way he'd never been before. "You excited?" he asked, looking up from the forms. "For June? For the program?" "Terrified," I admitted. "But yes. Excited. You earned this," he said. "Nobody gave it to you. Nobody can take it away. That scholarship is yours because you're brilliant and hardworking and exceptional. Not because anyone handed you advantages. Not because anyone protected you from consequences. Because you did the work." I thought about that. About 15 years of being told I was the problem. About being locked outside in a storm. About watching my sister smile while she destroyed my future. And I thought about standing here now, warm and safe, with a father who finally saw me and a future that was finally, actually mine. "I used to think," I said slowly, "that if I was just good enough, just smart enough, just perfect enough, Mom would love me the way she loved Tiffany. That I could earn it somehow. That it was my fault for not trying hard enough." "And now?" my father asked. "Now I know that love isn't something you earn. It's something you either give or you don't. She chose not to give it to me. That was her failure, not mine." My father reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "That's the smartest thing I've heard all year." The STEM program started in 4 weeks. I was packed. I was ready. I was leaving for a summer of learning and opportunities and a future that nobody could sabotage because I'd finally learned the most important lesson of all. Some people will never see your worth no matter what you do. And the ones who throw you into storms to protect their own comfort don't deserve a place in your sunshine. My mother wanted me to be small so Tiffany could shine. Instead, she taught me that real strength isn't staying warm inside while someone freezes outside. Real strength is standing in that storm, making the call that changes everything, and refusing to beg for scraps from people who were never going to feed you anyway. Patricia lost her house. Tiffany lost her luxury. And me. I finally found what I'd been searching for all along. A life where I mattered not because I'd earned it, but because I existed. And that, it turns out, is worth more than any estate. So let me ask you something, and I really want you to think about this. Have you ever been the scapegoat in your family? Have you ever been blamed for someone else's crimes? Have you ever stood outside in the metaphorical cold while the people who were supposed to love you stayed warm inside? Drop a comment and tell me your story. Because here's what I learned from that night in the storm. Family isn't the people who share your DNA. Family is the people who come get you when you're freezing. Family is the people who kick down doors and drive through flower beds and destroy their own comfort to protect yours. My mother taught me what love isn't. It isn't conditional, it isn't earned, and it definitely isn't standing inside drinking tea while your child suffers outside. My father taught me what love is. It's showing up, even when you're 2 hours away, even when it's inconvenient, even when it means destroying the fantasy you've been living in. Tiffany wanted to destroy my future because she was afraid I'd be better than her. But she gave me something more valuable than any scholarship. She showed me exactly who she was. And when people show you who they are, believe them. The house Patricia lost isn't mine yet. Won't be mine until I'm 25. But you know what? I don't need it. I'd rather live in a small apartment where I'm loved than a mansion where I'm tolerated. I'd rather be the daughter who survived the storm than the daughter who caused it. So if you're out there right now, if you're the scapegoat, if you're the one everyone blames, if you're standing outside in the cold wondering why you're not enough, you are enough. You were always enough. And the people who can't see that aren't the judges of your worth. They're just the people you'll leave behind when you finally realize you deserve sunshine.